start off with the conative function. So conative function, you can think about it as it helps us impel action. Think about it like that. Impel means to cause action in someone else, right? Conative function, cause action, impel action in someone else. So cause someone else to do something, right? So the conative function appears when the speaker tries to impel action, right? And that can be in various forms, right? So not physically, right? It could be physically, right? So it could be a physical action. So if I said something like, pass the salt, it's a command on the other person, right? Pass the salt, it's a physical action. You're impelling the other person, or you're causing the other person to take the salt bottle and give it to you. So it could be a physical action, pass the salt, or it could also be a mental one. So for example, like you could encourage someone to think about something. Okay? Oops, encourage someone to think. Right? So you can impel action in both the physical sense, pass the salt, do something, or a mental one, to encourage someone to think or mentally do something in their head. So it could be either. Okay? And so it could include a lot of things. The conative function could include a lot of things. It could include commands. It could include requests to do something, suggestions to do something, or questions that are designed to make the listener respond or to think about it, if that makes sense. So in terms of examples, I'll give you some meta-language. So the first one is imperative sentences. So imperative sentences are basically command sentences. You can think about them as commands. Something like pass the salt is an imperative sentence because it's commanding the person to pass the salt, right? It's not a declarative. It's not stating information. Like pass the salt isn't a statement of fact. It's asking you to actually do something. So it's impelling action. So imperative sentences like pass the salt are commands, right? Or something like stop. That's also an imperative sentence. It's commanding the person to literally stop. Or come here. It's also a command. So you can think about the conative function essentially as being a command or an instruction to another person. Hopefully that makes sense. And just as an extension, typically, if you're in year 11, you would know this. Typically, imperative sentences start with verbs. So pass the salt, pass is a verb. Stop, that's also a verb. Come here, come is a verb, right? So these imperative sentences or commands typically start with a verb. But don't worry too much about that. This is just extension knowledge, I guess. Even things like addressing the listener with pronouns. Again, there's technical definitions, but I'm not going to go into it yet. Just think about pronouns as being words like you. You, that's a pronoun. Don't worry about the technical definition. But if I address you directly and I say you, that's an example of the conative function because I'm addressing you and I'm making you do something specifically. Last one's a bit interesting. You can refer to someone by name. Right? So say we're sitting in a circle, or in fact, in this classroom setting, if I were to start my sentence, like if I wanted someone to answer a question and I just said, like if I just asked the question, no one would probably respond. But if I said, Samuel, can you answer this question? That impels Samuel to do an action, right? Whereas if I just said, can someone respond to this question? They're probably not going to do it. So using names, we call these vocatives in year 12. You can write that down. These names are vocatives. Using these vocatives and referring to someone by name by saying, I don't know, Justin, do this, right? That's impelling that specific person in the group to respond or to do something. So that's also quite conative in nature. So essentially, again, think about conative as being impelling action, causing someone to do something. and either in the physical sense or in the mental sense. What do I mean by mental sense? I'll give you an example. I'll type it out because my pen's scuffed. Would you want this to happen to yourself? Something like this. In layman term, does anyone happen to know what metalanguage this is? What do we call this type of language? Don't worry about, yeah,
Interrogative?
pejorative, like this one.
I said interrogative.
Oh, interrogative, sorry. I heard half the word. Interrogative, yes, it's an interrogative, sure. But like things like, could you please pass the salt? It's also an interrogative. But this would be, what function would this be? Yeah, that's conative. It's still commanding the other, even though it's a question, and I just said typically they're commands. This is still a question, but it's still commanding the other person to pass the salt, if that makes sense. I'm not going to go too much into it because I'd have to go into the meta language, but this is also a command. So this is conative, right? So it's not just the fact that it's any question. It's not the fact that it's any interrogative, but as Samuel said, it's a rhetorical interrogative. It's not actually asking you to physically do something. Like, could you please pass the salt? It's physically asking you to pass the salt. But here, it's a rhetorical in the sense that you just have to think about it mentally. You don't have to actually have to physically do something. So it's a rhetorical interrogative. Using the English language terms, it's rhetorical interrogative. Interrogative, by the way, means question. It's the more formal way of saying it. So it's a rhetorical interrogative that impels thought mentally as opposed to physically. Right? Hopefully that makes sense. So with something like this is the classic example of a mental conative function, right? Whereas there's a bunch of physical examples like please turn off your phone. Or in advertisements, you might see something like buy now and save 50%. Or like you should study for your SAQ. In fact, this is interesting. If you look at it alone, you would say this is a statement of fact, right? You should study for your SAQ tonight. Sounds like a statement of fact, like you're stating that. But really, if your parents or something told you that, and they said to you, you know, you should study for your SAQ tonight, it's probably more of a command than it is a statement of fact, right? In fact, it's probably just a suggestion, but it's still commanding you to do it. It's not just stating it for no reason, right? It's with the intention of you ultimately actually studying for your SAQ tonight. So it sounds like a statement of fact, but it's probably in reality a command. So we would actually say this is conative as opposed to referential. Hopefully that idea makes sense. But yeah, there's a lot of exceptions. It's not always just imperatives. You can have declaratives or statements of facts that's acting conative. You can have interrogatives that are acting conative. So it's not just imperatives. There's a lot of exceptions. But generally, instead of getting bogged down by the meta language, just think about it. Is what I said, is it impelling me to do something? Is it asking me to do something, either physically or mentally? And here, it's asking me to turn off my phone. Here, it's asking me to buy the phone. Here, it's telling me to study for my SAQ. Here, it's telling me to think about, would I want this to happen to myself? So just think about it in that sense. Hopefully that idea makes sense. Can everyone react before I move on? Does that make sense? Or should I re-explain something? Like in the general chat, put a thumbs up if it makes sense. Okay, cool. There's a really important point that, again, these misconception boxes, by the way, are things my year 12s get wrong, so I'm introducing them to you early. Conative does not mean persuasion, right? Conative isn't always about me persuading you to do something. So it's easy to confuse the conative function with persuasion, but they are not the same thing, right? Again, I'm going to type this. Persuasion is about convincing someone to believe or accept an idea, right? So it often uses things like, oh my God, often uses things like facts. It's probably going to use a lot of arguments. It's probably going to use a lot of emotional appeals to change someone's mind, right? That's what persuasion is all about. For example, eating too much sugar can cause serious health problems. If I were to read that, or if a fat person were to read that, well, probably won't change their mind, but besides the point. Eating too much sugar can cause serious health problems. Uh, the intention is that it tries to persuade the audience to accept the fact and change their opinion, right? That they should stop eating as much sugar, right? But does not directly tell them what to do, right? So it's using facts to convince someone to believe someone or to believe an idea that eating too much sugar can cause serious health problems. And as a result of that, it's persuading the other person, right? So it's persuading it, but it's not conative in nature, right? It's not asking them to stop eating sugar, right? So it's persuasive, but it's not conative, right? Conative function, on the other hand, is about getting someone to actually act on something or to respond on something or to think about something, right? To do or think in a particular way. And so it involves language that like commands someone to do something or requests someone to do something or urges someone to do something or encourages someone to do something. So it encourages a response or a behavior, right? Whereas this one, again, think about it. It's not actually commanding you to eat less sugar. It's not requesting you to eat less sugar, right? It's not forcing you to act or respond or think on it, right? It's simply just persuading the audience through logic and reason. But it's not actually commanding you to do it. Whereas this one, if I said study for your SAQ tonight, or if I said something, you should study for your SAQ tonight, that would probably be a command, right? Command of sorts, right? So this is directly asking or telling someone to take action, right? And so this would be an example of a conative function, whereas this one would be an example of the referential function, because this is a statement of fact. It's persuading me, but it's not actually forcing me to do anything. So it's not conative, whereas this one is conative. Hopefully that idea makes sense. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Or can you react, just to be sure? No? Does it make sense? Overlaps between? Yes. Yes, there are overlaps, yes. But then the point was, like, yes, there are overlaps between persuasion and conative, but those that are not, like, those that are in this region don't conflate it and say that it is conative. But yes, there are a lot of overlaps.